Well, welcome to number 788 podcast with me, your host, Desmond Latham. We're chatting to Max Lauker. It's actually about Max, this podcast. So I'm just here as a interviewer, and Max is not his real name, but number 788 is his real number. He's written a memoir called Number 788, My Experiences in Swedish Special Operations, Preparing for NATO and the War on Terror. We're protecting identities of those involved in the story because many are still on Special Forces front lines, and also some we're not happy to be mentioned. So we're going to just use initials or other techniques to discuss that. It's a 6-part series, and we're in episode 3. And last we were speaking to Max, he was talking about some of the post-training and the prep for deployments into the field, so to speak. After some years of training, 400 days, I think it was, Max.
It was, and hi, Des, I'm happy to be here again. And yes, it was 400 days for the initial batch of training. So it was quite long, I would say, or I would say it's quite standard, but it was quite long to do it, run it for as a first time kind of trial, because you have to weed out all the mistakes and improve. So usually they try to make it shorter, but yeah, it worked well.
I mean, I'm jumping around a little bit on the chapters on the book because it's launched. How's it doing, by the way?
That is something we need to ask the publisher because the numbers haven't been released yet. But I'm seeing that it's going in and out of stock. So that means that somebody's buying, and it has been on the Swedish history best-selling list for quite some time now. So I hope it's doing well.
And you've got a quote here, I need to know, is your team ready to handle a possible attempt on my life, organized and executed by the GRU or FSB? Tell me about that incident.
That is basically, we had been to the UK maybe a few months before that, and we had been training with the Force Research Unit, FRU, in Balfour in the UK. And when we came back, we were almost immediately sent back to the UK because we were going to do a close protection kind of course with a colleague to the major who led this platoon. So he set it up, and we were we didn't ask that many questions. Sometimes they do that. Things like that, you go and get some extra training. I mean, it was a civilian, ex-Mossad, Israeli guy, who had this company. It was a consulting company in the United Kingdom. And we were sent there to do this close protection course, and we did. And we were basically baffled that it was so easy because this was an entry-level course, basically, that they were providing. What we didn't know, that we were actually vetted for other missions during this training session. But at the end of it, we were quite disappointed because it was very, very basic for us. There were two British police guys or ex-police guys and a Royal Marine that was attending as well. So we were disappointed a bit and ready to go home. But then we had to step in as a security detail for him over the weekend because he was actually running short. So that was not the purpose of this. And that was not why they were vetting us at all. But it just happened by accident that we got the opportunity to do that. So we did a mission with him and this Russian oligarch that he was providing security for. So it was like a soft start. I mean, it wasn't a deployment as such, but it was still a part of it. It was pre-vetting for another deployment down the line in Latin America.
Apparently you were a food tester for this oligarch. Tell me a bit about that story. That was quite an unusual moment, wasn't it?
It was. I mean, we came we were not fresh out of the army. We were well-trained and well-equipped and all of that. But this was the first time in an executive environment because we have never done anything civilian up to that point except for training, basically. And I don't know to this day if he was serious or if it was his dark, Russian kind of humor. But he said when we were going in, because I was going as his close protection officer, so I was going to sit next to him during the dinner that he had at his small private tavern that was owned by one of his friends. And he said that if I'm putting any food towards your side, I want you to taste it. And if you feel any chemical flavors, an excessive taste of garlic or almond, you spit it out and we go. So basically, that was his. That he said that on the car there, or in the car on our way there. So that was quite. There is there was, of course, some seriousness in it because the FSB and the Russian intelligence had been trying to kill him several times. And I mean, poison is not unheard of when it comes to the Russians. So it was absolutely a real thing. But I don't know if it actually was he joking, but I actually think he meant it.
But did you go through the meal, watching your food a little more carefully?
Yeah, probably. I mean, all his food was handled. He had his own chef that always cooked all his food, and they brought them in locked boxes and locked cooling bags and all of that. But when I got home after this, of course, you get a bit more, you're a bit more aware about these kind of things because it's actually a real thing. So, yeah.
Yeah, locked cooler boxes. That's a first. Moving along now to the rendition in Latin America, chapter 11, you speak about being part of a op there. Tell me a bit about that. What happened?
So basically, we come back from this training session in the UK. We spent a few months up at the regiment, and then I'm asked to go to Latin America first, by myself to prep for a team that is going to arrive. And I don't know which people are in the team. I don't exactly know what we're going to do, but they basically said, go there, learn the ropes, learn some Spanish, see how it works down there. So they just handed me a large sum of cash, and away I went. And they said, yeah, be prepared. It can be within a month or two. So that is basically what I did. I set myself up in Panama because our final destination was Colombia, but I was going to sit tight in Panama for a while. Went to language school. I got my apartment. And then I started to get into the expat community, and I met an American, an ex-spook that worked as a station chief down in Panama during Noriega's days. So he ran his own security company. So basically, he offered me work, and this is outside of the army. But I mean, I was just trying to expand my network and do a bit of that. So I jumped on board, and I was running he had a crew of 20 like taxi drivers that he used for surveillance and all of that. So I did a few missions with him, or ran his taxi crew for a bit. And then he asked me, because I said, I need to leave now. I got the signal to go to Colombia and start prepping for the other guys. And then he said, I have one last thing that I would like you to do. And I said, okay. So I was put together. It was some kind of ad hoc team. I think it was probably run by the Americans, but a few locals, an American, Ukrainian, and myself. And I didn't know what I was jumping into at that point either. But we went to Venezuela under cover, and our mission was to extract a person that was coming through Venezuela, and he was that they couldn't extradite, so we needed to take him back to Panama. And this is outside of my own government's. They don't know anything. I created this opportunity or mission or whatever myself, but I can't say that it gave me a network for the rest of my life.
I'm interested in how you gauged what you could do and what you couldn't do. How were you balancing this against your building a network and so on, the logic?
No, basically I wasn't, because you have to think about it. At this point, I was 22 years old, 23 years old. I was very young, not super experienced. And of course, I mean, what commanding officers are going to send 22-year-old guy to set up shop in Panama and receive a team and, build networks with a bunch of, just give him some cash and off you go. I think the whole thing kind of shows you the zeitgeist at that time and what kind of mentality that they had. So they were, of course, taking large risks. Maybe they weren't expecting that I was going to go off in a tangent like this, but it happens. It happens. And of course, I mean, this would have had very severe effects if something happened, because, I mean, it's some kind of multinational mercenary operation. Of course, there is states running this behind the scenes, but I mean, nobody would have had your back. And so I would say that it was fairly dangerous, but it helped me out later in life because the connections I made there were quite valuable.
Vasco is the target that you were working with.
Yes. Yes.
I know you've changed his name. You were quite involved with his rendition. Explain what happened.
This was his rendition. This was what happened. This was the mission that I created, or that I got involved in. This was not a sanctioned mission from the government. This was of my own creation, so to speak, that I got involved in that. And I think that basically I had made a good impression, and they needed an extra hand because, of course, they need expendables. And that is what I was in that operation. So that was a very unsanctioned mission.
Fascinating. And then moving to the FARC in Colombia, what's the Joint Task Force Omega, White Raven? Is that the actual name? And if it is, well, just tell us more about the FARC and your involvement. What happened? The things you can say.
That is, that is the actual name, and they've been running this for quite some time because the Colombians, they have a concept where they do 90 days of training and then 90 days of deployment, 90 days of training to keep fresh, and they have had support from a lot of Western agencies and military powers, and primarily the United States Special Forces. I think at the time the 7th Special Forces Group were mentoring the Colombians, and we were deployed there to basically, the Swedish government traded some experience. I mean, they traded winter training for basically combat experience because that is what they were aiming to get for us. Because otherwise we had this new platoon, we were inexperienced, we haven't seen any action, so we needed some action. So we were deployed. I after this Panama, after Venezuela, I went to Colombia. I prepared with our contacts for the team to arrive. Quite small team, 6 guys, and we were training with the military police battalion in Bogota for a week or so, and then we were deployed with this White Raven, which was a part of this multinational kind of force, but it was not a part of the mentoring force. It was a part of, do whatever you want kind of force. So that was a deal that all of the Western nations that had been supplying to this mentoring mission said that we also want to have our own show running there, no questions asked. And they said, okay, of course. So there was a lot of intel, signal intelligence and other things happening there. But basically, we were there for a few months and 3 months. That's one rotation. And we were assisting the Germans and some other nations in collecting intelligence. And basically what they're doing this disruptive operations because they need to. They're good at hiding. They're good at transporting stuff through the jungle. They're good at finding new routes. And one of the more important things is to disturb them so you can see, try to tell where they are going or which routes that they're using. And that was our main task, to try to intervene, or not intervene, but to disrupt and monitor the effects.
By now you've had quite a bit of training experience in the Arctic, and you're now into a jungle situation, and with working in favelas, trying to move through favelas and take action inside the favelas there and so on. How did you mentally prepare yourself?
I think it was a hard preparation because we were never prepared for that. Later in my career, we did a proper jungle training in Belize with the British, of course. But this was the first, but I think the climate we handled pretty well because you go from one extreme to another, and basically you just know that, hydrate, dress appropriately, do your anti-mosquito routine, and you will be pretty fine. I would say one of the more challenging things are maybe when you do operations with that we did with the Colombian military police, and they're raiding favelas and stuff like that, because that's a different dimension of it, because that is basically Afghanistan times 100, because you're working in an environment where there is basically only civilian casualties. Whatever you do, you have 1 or 2% chance of hitting anything that is relevant, because everybody's working. Not because they want to, but because they have to, working for the people running it. So I think that was the hardest mental challenge, because we were not prepared for that. Prepared for jungle, Arctic, desert. It's more or less the same when it comes down to it. It's warfare. You have an enemy, you have somebody shooting at you, and you are shooting back. Even if, it was our first experience with that. So, but I think we handled it well. But the favelas, that was a different game for us, because we were not mentally prepared for this. physically, yes. Training-wise, absolutely. But this is something you have to... I mean, the instructors, they've done this for years and years, and they even say, avoid even trying this because it's bad. It's gonna leave scars forever. Because it's like being in a toxic environment, and it's gonna kill you eventually. It's just a matter of time. So yeah, I think that was the hardest experience.
I mean, talk to me of the movement from training in black and then into what they call tropical. Is that what you're talking about here? Yeah.
So basically, we had 3 roles. We have black. We had a QRF role, which did more of these, disruptive, aggressive, direct action type of operations, and then tropical was just base duty, and then we had a few others, pink, for example, for surveillance, because there was a lot of surveillance mapping out. There was a lot of, we had one shopper that was equipped with frequency jamming and frequency recording equipment. So it was a lot of that. We didn't run anything of that. We were just manning it, but there was technicians from other units that did it. But yeah.
You went back to Sweden, you left Latin America, and as you say, you found adventure there. And you dipped your toes in warmer waters, and then off you went to the Balkans. How did that come about?
That came about. That was our first official deployment, because that was the first that was sanctioned by the government. Also, we had built enough street cred for this platoon to even exist, because as you see in the beginning of the book, the platoon was just made from a handful of good men, but then it started to producing results, getting some street cred, and then it just existed after that. So that was our first deployment. I was, of course, very, very disappointed because Afghanistan was heating up at this point. Balkans this was what it's been going on since 1999. So it was pretty cold at that point. I mean, most of the rotations of Swedish military personnel was basically something like territorial forces, National Guard, that kind of people. And I'm not saying that in a bad way. It was just the intensity was very low, and of course we were jacked up and hyped for something else. But it was actually one of the better missions even today, because it was one of the few missions where we were allowed to go full circle. Because we come down, this is in 2006. We rotate down undercover as a reserve unit, a technical unit. And then we are basically given free hands. And what we're talking about here is the people who are left, the war criminals that has actually been managing to hide for all of this time. And that was quite a treat, if you can put it like that. Because it doesn't get more high level than that. Not even, I haven't done more high level in Afghanistan. I haven't done more high level in Iraq. And it's more intense in Iraq. It's more possibly more dangerous, but these are when you're looking for the really, for the big boys. So it was a game changer for me, and it's still one of the prime missions or premier missions that I ever did.
The point is that Sweden, you're saying territorial force almost. I know you're not negative necessarily, but pointing out that the Swedish deployments up to a certain stage were seen as secondary, and you not being NATO at that stage must have meant strategically they were deploying you in a different way. Or what's your view of the political deployment in the Balkans?
At that point, we have everything we have done up to that point is peacekeeping. We haven't done peace enforcing. We did, if you count Congo in the 50s, and 60s, we did. But except from that, it's all been peacekeeping. And it was the same here, and it's nothing wrong with that. But this was our first step into, because they wanted to take a more aggressive role. We did have, in 2003, we had special forces in the Artemis operation in Congo, of course. But we're talking about that, again, it's a handful of guys. And now we have a platoon size special purpose unit element that is actually starting to gain reputation within the American intelligence circle and the German intelligence circle and the Italian intelligence circle, which was very, very different. And also the French, of course. So I think it was a level up I think that was the purpose, to try to force a leveling up, because of course we couldn't anticipate when we are when we were going to join NATO, if we were ever, but they wanted to play a more active role because, of course, if you're not a NATO country, you're always going to be on the back burner, and you're never going to have access to the core of it. But you will to some extent if you're providing something that they don't have.
I get it. Well, I think we will end the discussion for this episode. When we come back in episode 4, we're going to have a look at your boots on the ground contact chapter, and going forward from there, it's Afghanistan. And where else were you deployed after Afghanistan?
I think we're going to shadow the end part of the Balkan deployment, because that is the more interesting one, or that's the interesting part of it, and a bit of the fallout from that, and then it's Afghanistan and Iraq, and into Africa maybe. Max
Lauker, who is a former, do I call you special forces? What do you prefer to be known as?
I think special operations.
788. Is the name of the book. The memoir is called Number 788, My Experiences in Swedish Special Operations Preparing for NATO and the War on Terror. Thanks, Max.
Thank you, Des. Great chatting with you.